Proverbs. We've studied short snippets of wisdom. We've studied some context. We've studied words. We've looked at the whole picture of what Solomon is trying to teach us when he penned these words. From experience, from God himself, Solomon was giving us application for today. And a lot of the Proverbs are written in, you've probably already noticed it, parallelism. He says the same thing a couple of times in different words. Even sometimes in the same verse, he'll say the same thing and just use different words. We do that all the time, right? We live our life with that. You know, we can say the same thing, just use different words. So, Heather and I went to the football game yesterday, and one team played really well, and the other team got beat by a good team. That's saying the same thing, right? It's just different words. And if you don't know, Tennessee got wore out. Georgia is a really, really good football team. They're big and strong at every level. Anyway, but it's saying the same thing, right? So that's pretty much what Solomon is trying to do through the whole book of Proverbs. So today we'll study chapter 17, and the chapter actually ends with what I think the meat of the chapter is. It talks about learning, understanding, to be quiet, to listen. How do you learn to understand? You know, we have to listen to something, right? We have to get it in. So before we get into 17, let's back up to one verse in chapter 16, verse 10. It starts with a word that I completely mispronounced, said the wrong word last week. So the word I used was destruction. Well, that's not destruction in that context, is it? So I was really just seeing if y'all were paying attention. And you were, because it was brought to my attention. But the word is, let's look at the verse, chapter 16, verse 10. Deviation is on the lips of the king. His mouth must not transgress in judgment. That's basically a word that's different than destruction. It means to foretell. It means to, tell a forecast, basically. And that's what that verse is trying to teach us. And I apologize for using, I dismiss it on maybe I need another set of glasses or whatever. But the reality is, I'll read a word and it'll start with what I think the word should be, and it's completely not. So if it starts with a D in destruction, so that's where I went. But trying to do better. But any questions on that before we get into 17? I just wanted to clear that up, to make sure that we were all on the same page. So chapter 17, Solomon, throughout the book, he's done a really good job of giving us application. We have to understand it. We have to apply the knowledge. 17 is exactly application for us today. It is spot on words that we could use for our learning in 2023. Verse 1, better is a dry morsel with quietness than a house full of feasting with strife. A wise servant will rule over a son who causes shame, and he will share an inheritance among the brothers. The refining pot is for silver and for furnace for gold, and the Lord tests the hearts. An evildoer gives heed to false lips. A liar listens eagerly to a spiteful tongue. He who mocks the poor reproaches his maker. He who is glad at calamity will not go unpunished. So those are 5 verses that we can apply today. Better is a dry morsel with quietness than a house full of feasting. Literally a ceremonial meal, a sacrificial meal. So it's better to have a dry morsel than to have a feast. In quietness. What does quietness represent? What is it teaching us? What does the word quietness mean? Peace. It's peace. I know of y'all know her too. I won't use her name because I don't want to embarrass her. But I went to her house, and some of her grandchildren were there, and they were having quiet time. And I was like, well, that's good. Everybody likes quiet time, right? What is quiet time? It is a process, a learning, if you will, for wisdom. We have to meditate on it, right? And we have to think about it. So in order to do that, it needs to be quiet. Now, there's exceptions to the rule. Y'all all remember and know Alan Webster. When he was in school, Dan Winkler was teaching him at maybe a master's level, and he wasn't paying attention. Alan was basically balancing his checkbook. So Dan called him out. He said, Alan, what did I just say? Well, Alan gave him the verses and gave him the context and told him what he was teaching. Not only was Alan balancing his checkbook, he was listening to something in a earpiece. And Dan went, okay, you're an exception to the rule. I'll give you a pass because evidently you can multitask. He told that to be the truth. But for the most part, quietness is no distractions, right? So how's it better to have a dry morsel of quietness than a big feast, a ceremonial, sacrificial feast? With strife. Very important word, with strife. It's not wrong to have the big feast, is it? No, it's the strife that generates the lack of quietness, basically. So what's the difference? Why is it important that we think about this? Absolutely. Heather said that she basically works with and talks to strangers every day on the phone. And the leading question is, what are you doing for the holidays? And a lot of times, some of the times, the people that she's talking to doesn't get along with the family that she's talking about. So they would rather be by themselves, quiet, without any strife. And that's a good point. When Heather and I first got married, she would tell me that she needed some Heather time. Sorry, Heather, I didn't tell you I was going to say this. What's Heather time? It's basically quietness. And I didn't understand it. I really didn't. Because I was like, let's go and go and go. But the older I get, it's a little easier to be quiet and sit there, But she was saying, then, we just let's rest a little bit. Let's think about some things. Let's put it in our brain. That's exactly the application of what we're trying to do today. Look at verse 4. An evildoer gives heed to false lips. A liar listens eagerly to a spiteful tongue. An evildoer gives heed to what? Lies. The evildoer enjoys the lies. Why would an evildoer enjoy lies? Sure. That's probably how he gets through life, Clyde said. It's a mindset, isn't it? It's what they choose to do. It's what they want. It's a lifestyle. They want to live with drama, Beth said. Who likes drama? Yeah, that's what I thought. An evildoer relishes in all that chaos. So look at the end of this verse, though. A liar listens eagerly to a spiteful tongue. So false lips, and now the same thing, different words. A liar listens eagerly to a spiteful tongue. I kind of get the picture of, if you read a really good book, or if you're reading something that you're interested in, or you're watching a really good, wholesome movie, or maybe even a sporting event, and you're on the edge of your seat, and you can't wait for the next thing to happen. You know, you're excited, you're tuned in. That's the picture I get here of a liar eagerly wanting the drama. Bad deal. Look at verse 6. We didn't read it, but we'll read the next few verses. Children's children are the crown of old men, and the glory of children is their father. Excellent speech is not becoming to a fool, much less lying lips to a prince. A present is precious stone in the eyes of the possessor. Wherever he turns, he prospers. He who covers a transgression seeks love, but he who repeats a matter separates friends. So, what's verse 6, the application? What does it say? We would say it like this: grandchildren are the apple of our eyes. My dad told me one time, he said, you know, Brian, you're just the middleman in this operation, right? He wanted to see our kids, you know. And the old man in the New King James Version is a respectful term for grandparents. Why are grandkids so good? Why does everybody love grandkids? Send them home. Grandma used to say when her kids would come up from Chattanooga, Rosemary Scarborough, she'd say, you know, the best part of the trip? When I saw the tail lights leaving my driveway. That's what she told us a lot. But what's the implication there? You get the grandbabies and you give them all the sugar, you give them all the ice cream you can give them, you hug them, you love them, you spoil them, and you send them home. That's what Solomon's saying, isn't it? Hey, this children's children is the old man's. Have you ever heard the expression bee's knees? That's what grandchildren are. So it's scriptural to love your grandchildren, folks. I will. Heather asked that we look at verse 5. He who mocks the poor reproaches his maker. He who is glad at calamity will not go unpunished. It's pretty straightforward, isn't it? So, what are we going to do when we say mocks the poor? He who mocks the poor. What does mock mean? Making fun of. Why do we make fun of the poor? Why do we make fun of anything, really? Sir? Ignorance. That's what he said. Let me get Beth, Dennis, and I'll come right back to you. Beth said, make yourself feel bigger. What'd you say, Dennis? And make that other person feel small. But he who mocks the poor reproaches his maker. It's pretty strong. If I make fun of Russell, which I'm not, just because I'm looking at him, if I make fun of Russell to make myself look bigger, it hurts Russell, right? But what else does it do? God is reproached. God is sad. And God is more important than me and more important than Russell. God loves both of us the same. So why do I have the opportunity and reverse it? What happens if Russell makes fun of me? You know? Yes, ma'am. No, it's not. Carol said in the Hebrew, when you actually write the word for God, Hebrew's top to bottom. And it actually forms a stick man. The whole man. So when you write God and you're making fun of someone, literally you're making fun of God's name holder. You're literally making fun of God, right? Yes, ma'am. Beth said the ultimate hurt is on me when I make fun of someone because I've sinned. I've transgressed the law. And what happens if we transgress the law? Heaven's not going to be our home unless we change it, unless we repent of that. So yes, sir. Lewis said it's going to hurt me in the long run. And I'm not going to make fun of you, Russell. I'm just telling you, I won't do it. Because all these people's told me it's sin. I won't do it. But we have a fine line sometimes, right? Because I'm all in on a good joke, or I like to tease, and I like to have fun. I really do. Most of y'all probably know that. All of you know that. It's great. You know what laughter is? It's an instant vacation. But when I start belittling someone, and I think that's why Heather maybe wanted to talk about it, not me personally, but maybe for us to apply that. Because it's so easy to make fun of people in certain situations. Again, yeah, that's right. Clyde reiterated what Mr. Curley said. It's ignorant. It shows that we're ignorant. So what's the end of the verse? What is calamity? Ken said that basically it's a parallelism that we've already talked about, and the calamity is downtrodden. And it's a big difference between teasing someone. Ken and I tease about something, we're having a good time. It's different than actually really making fun of someone or looking down on them, and they're downtrodden. That's where the seriousness comes in. Any other questions or comments? Yes, ma'am. Carol said she's studying Hebrew on a level that I don't know that I'll ever be able to study at that. But anyway, the first word she learned, say it again, Raha, is basically literally evil calamity. So calamity at its base is evil. And that's where the part comes. That's the danger. Yes, sir, Mr. Curley. He asked the question, who in the Bible became poor? You want me to answer it? Or you don't answer it? Who in the Bible became poor, right? Who is that? Christ did, right? So if we think about it and we go all the way through that, who wants to make fun of Christ today? That's the context of this verse is what we're talking about. Thank you, Heather. Any other comments at all? Let's look at verse 7. It's a interesting combination of words. Verse 7, excuse me. Excellent speech is not becoming to a fool. What is excellent speech and who are fools? Excellent speech. What is excellent speech? We've heard speakers, and we would say maybe he's polished. That was a well-given speech. She is well-spoken. What does well-spoken mean? Eloquent. You can put the English language, the words together that flows smoothly and people can understand easily, right? Maybe not some of the words, because the words are maybe challenging. We have to figure out what they mean, but the delivery is eloquent, right? So what is excellent speech? In the context of what we're trying to do, could it be truth? Could it be knowledge and understanding that we get that wisdom? Because we're trying to teach Acts chapter 2, the day of Pentecost, it teaches baptism. We're trying to do that in our world, right? We look at 1 John and we think about what? Love. We look at the Gospel of John, and God is the Word. All this together makes excellent speech, right? So who are the fools? It says Pretty much the same thing in different words. Excellent speech is not becoming to a fool, much less lying lips to a prince. A fool does not have excellent speech because they are looking for the evil. It's in the context going back up to that evildoers and the calamity, right? So the excellent speech, if you could say it in one word, I would say excellent speech is God. Because we have the Bible full of excellent speech, right? And the fool is the one that's not going to heed to that instruction. Or the fool is the one that chooses not to obey God. Well, I don't believe, I'm not ever going to believe, I just don't want to, it's not me. Whatever the excuse somebody gives, that's what it boils down to, right? Heather said that the little different view of it is a fool can say words, come out well, eloquent speech, but it's full of fluff because it doesn't change who they are. The words are not backed up by the actions, right? So it's important that we use our life, our actions more than words. Is that what excellent speech is? Is that what we're talking about? We've got to learn to say what you mean and what? You mean what you say. That's what we're talking about, right? Yes, sir. Dennis said that basically, to summarize what he said, it's a noble. You do it with love, but even a negative could be noble. It's in an effort to help someone grow. That's a good application as well of what we're trying to figure out here in verse 7. Let's look at verse 9. He who covers a transgression seeks love, but he who repeats a matter separates friends. So what transaction are we trying to cover with love? Transaction. See, there it was again. Transgression. What transgression are we covering up with love? He who covers a transgression seeks love. If I have belittled or made fun of Ken, and I sin, and Ken comes to me and says, Brian, you're in the wrong. Let me show you why. I love you to the point I want to tell you why. And I apologize to him and I ask forgiveness. What has Ken done right then? Did he not cover up the transgression with love? And that's where it stops. It's done, right? But if even a whisper separates friends, what is that? If I walk over and go, have you heard about that Mr. Clyde Randolph? And I walk away, what's going to happen? Yeah, I've heard of him. Yeah, Ken said, I've heard of him. What happens right there? Look back up in chapter 16. There's a verse that'll help us with it. It's on the same opening, probably, verse 28. A whisper separates the best of friends. And now he says it again, this matter, if you repeat it, it's going to separate friends. Right? Ken said it goes a little further, even just he and I, when I use my analogy. If Beth were over there and she heard it, what has she got to do? There's a choice involved, right? So instead of creating the strife between me and Ken, she could come to me and say, I heard what you said. Can we talk about it? And it's sometimes we have to be quiet, he said. And we do, and we'll get to a verse in just a minute that talks about that. Yes, ma'am. She said that this verse also can apply to marriage. You know, if you're living in marriage and you're living in the same house, it's a day-to-day, it's a work, isn't it? It's hard work. But you actually have to, if you forgive it, you need to forget it. And don't bring it up, let it go, not even, to the point of, well, you remember 4 years ago, or you remember 2 weeks ago, or you always do this. So that's a good point. It applies to us today. And the verse that I referenced in this context is verse 28. And there's more to it, and we'll get to it in just a second. Even a fool is counted wise when he holds his peace. When he shuts his lips, he is considered what? He's paying attention. He's listening. Whoo. She said that is so hard to do. I've got a note, and Barry Kennedy and I were talking about this one day, playing ping pong at lunch. And he said these words, Proverbs 17:28, just because you have the ability to speak doesn't mean you have to. Just because you have the ability to speak doesn't mean that you should. I went, Barry, that's pretty sharp. Where'd that come from? He said, I don't know. I read it somewhere. He dismissed it, And then we went on about our ping pong bank. But there's a lot of wisdom there, right? Just because you can say it doesn't mean you have to. Just because Beth heard me make fun of Ken, she does not have to go to Ken and say, did you hear what Brian said to you? That's terrible. Shut up and listen. Study to be quiet. That's what we're learning, right? Study to be quiet. Remove no doubt. He said it's better to, say it again, because I want to make sure I get it right. Better to keep your mouth closed and listen than to open it and remove all doubt. Than to be thought a fool. It's all the same context. There's a parallelism, right? We said the same thing in 3 different words. So look at verse, unless there's any other comments here, look at verses 12 and 13. Let a man meet a bear robbed of her cubs rather than a fool in his folly. I don't want nothing to do with a bear. We go to Pigeon Forge and we go to Cage Cove and we look at them sometimes if they're in a tree from the safety of our car. But I don't want to be out in their territory. And I sure don't want to be with a mama bear that's looking for her cub and I'm in between them. How bad is that going to be? But that's better than a fool in his folly. The ending is going to be worse. That's what Clyde said. It could be because the fool's not going to change his mind. That's what this verse is talking about. You want to fight a bear? No. You want to fight a bear that's looking for a cub? No. But yes, I would do that before the end of the punishment. That's what Solomon's teaching us, right? Why did he choose the word bear and her cubs? Everybody knew what a bear and a cub was going to do, right? Solomon was wise in saying, this bear will take your head off. Yes, sir. Clyde said in the study Bible that he's using, it's defined a fool is stupid and unwise. That's what my dictionary says. And that's spot on. Look at verse 13. Whoever rewards evil for good, evil will not depart from his house. Good for evil. What is it? How do we apply that today? How do we do that? Whoever rewards evil for good, evil will not depart from his house. How do we return evil for good? Yeah. Carol said that it happens every day. It happens on a basis that if you do something good, someone questions the motives, they get to the wrong reputation, everything goes bad because of the fool. Here's an example that happened to me. Someone asks for help, I give them cash, they go buy alcohol, they wreck their car, what happens? Is that returning evil for good? Is that accident on me because I gave them the cash to buy the alcohol? No, it's not, right? But the smarter decision would have been, yes, I will help you. Let's go get some gas, or let's go get some food, or let's go do what you need to do. You need a room to stay. We, as the elders, had a situation one time. Couple, not married, needed a room. And we said, we will help you, but you're not staying in the same room. And they said, thank you, but we're not staying apart. That would have been returning evil for good. If we hadn't asked, I'm glad Frank asked that question, because I just assumed they were married. He said, are y'all married? You know how Frank is. There's two people in the world that their mamas named them spot on. Frank Bohannon is one. I've told him to his face. I said, how do you say that? With love, Brian. I said, okay, fair enough. But he can say things I can't say. And another one is a Mr. Cashman. His name's Cashman, and he's got tons and tons and tons and tons of cash. Tons of it. He's actually supporting a missionary out of a trust fund from the leftovers. So that's his name's Cashman. So those two people are named spot on. But what's the point? Evil for good. That's the concept, right? So we've got to think about it. We can't do that. So for the sake of time, let's look at one more verse. We've talked about verse 28. Let's look at verse 23 and 24. I said one more. Sorry, let's do two more. A wicked man accepts a bribe behind the back. To what? Pervert the ways of justice. Wisdom is in the sight of him who has understanding, but the eyes of a fool are on the ends of the earth. So a wicked man accepts a bribe behind the back. I'm going to give you this bribe in order to affect the outcome of the situation. Does that happen today? It happens every day at every level, does it not, of the world? Because the love of money is the root of all evil, and if I can get more money, I don't really necessarily care. Does the means justify the end? But wisdom is in the sight of him who has understanding. Is that talking about physical sight? Wisdom is the sight of the man that has understanding. I think it's teaching faith. I think it's teaching that we can believe in heaven, and our knowledge and our applied understanding gets us wisdom, right? Because he says the next part of it is the eyes. That's a physical term. And all the fool has to look forward to is what he can see. They don't believe in heaven. They don't believe. They see the ends of the earth, right? So wisdom, faithful, eyes, spiritual, just seeing the end. Unfortunately, we're out of time, and that's a very... We had our plow very high today in chapter 17. Next week we'll do chapter 18, good Lord wills. And there's some verses there that talks about friends, what a friend is, what a friend would do for you. and that kind of thing. So we'll study chapter 18 next week. Thank you very much.